Volume 1, Chapter 9 of The Female American, or The Adventures of Unca Eliza Winkfield. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. Terrified at the annual visitation of the Indians, she intends to conceal herself in the subterranean passage, resolves to convert the Indians, takes her station in the body of the idol. The time now drew pretty near when the Indians were to come to pay their annual visit to the idol of the sun. This reflection put me upon thinking how I should secret myself during that day. I was indeed informed by the hermit's manuscript that he contented himself with staying within his cell, and 40 years had found that precaution sufficient for his concealment. But still I was afraid to follow his example. Perhaps my being a woman made me more timorous. That, thought I, which has never happened may possibly arrive, and if prudence teaches us always to avail ourselves of the best means in our power, I ought rather to secret myself in the subterraneous passage, a place in which I shall certainly be less liable to be found, and certainly unused by the hermit, only because unknown to him, for I found no mention of it, and most undoubtedly he would not have passed over, in silence, such an extraordinary discovery. The circumstance of the 2 bolts within side of the iron door, which opened into the passage, confirmed my opinion in the fitness of this asylum, as by their means I could fasten myself in. I had no sooner made my fixed determination to retire to this place, but a very strange thought arose in my mind. It was nothing less than this: to ascend into the hollow idol, speak to the Indians from thence, and endeavor to convert them from their idolatry. A bold attempt, not rashly to be undertaken. I weighed this for several days in my mind. As the manner of my education had afforded me an opportunity of learning several of the Indian dialects, so as to speak them with the utmost ease, I thought it very probable they might speak some one of them, and the construction of the image, as before observed, was such that if they came within any tolerable distance of it, I should discover whether I understood them or not. If the latter, it would remain only for me to be silent, but if I should understand their language, I thought the extraordinariness of the event, my speaking to them, would appear miraculous, fill them with awe, and prejudice their minds greatly in favor of what I should say to them. I further strengthened my resolution with this reflection, that an attempt to teach the knowledge of the true God to those who know him not was laudable, and might not want a providential sanction. As to the human means, I knew I was tolerably well principled in the theory of religion by my uncle's great care, as already mentioned. With respect to the Indians, I very well knew that they are generally of a docile disposition, and that if you once convince them that your intentions towards them are friendly, no people are more grateful, nor are there any in whom you can, safely, place a greater confidence. Again, I considered that if I should hereafter judge it prudent to discover myself to them, and to go and live among them, that my tawny complexion would be some recommendation. Supposing all this should take place, I thought that though it might not open a way to my return to Europe, yet it might to my living a much happier life, and give me an opportunity of doing abundantly more good than I had the least reason to think I should ever effect during the whole course of my life. The more I considered the affair, the more resolute I became to undertake it. However, I was determined to give it a very deliberate consideration. Nay, I even made it the subject of my prayers, that if I might become an instrument to promote the knowledge and glory of God, and the salvation and happiness of any of his creatures, I might have his blessing on my endeavors. Surely this was not superstition in one who believes in a particular providence, and of this persuasion shall no man rob me. Certainly, he who would divide the belief of a particular providence from religion destroys that which he should retain. He takes from man that hope which only can support him under the vicissitudes and cares of this life. Let a man be thoroughly persuaded that he is not the subject of divine care. What can support him in the hour of affliction? What can prevent him from seeking relief from the pistol or the dagger? But leaving these reflections to those who are so happy as to think, I return to my history. I reflected that as there were several holes or openings in the image, I might possibly be seen through them by the Indians, before I might have leisure to judge whether I should address myself to them or not, which might be attended with unforeseen consequences to my great disadvantage. To come to a certainty as to this material point, I proceeded in this manner. I took one of my gowns and carried it into the statue, and with other things so stuffed it out as to make it fast within the idol, and to cover all the holes. I then went out upon the island and carefully surveyed the statue round, and found, to my great satisfaction, that the several perforations grew narrower as they approached the interior part of the statue, and were so deep that they cast a shadow within themselves, so that upon the nearest approach it was impossible to see into it, without there had been a light withinside. However, at least, I could not distinguish my gown, and the statue was too high for any person to bring his eyes, or even his hands, near to the openings. But for fear this deception might be owing to the gowns covering the holes more closely than the body could, I took it away, and once more went out to make a second observation, and had still the pleasure to find it was impossible to see into the statue at all. Though this danger was entirely removed, there still remained another. I had discovered, as the reader may remember, that such was the wonderful mechanism of this statue, that the least sound became very audible. The noise I might make then at getting into it might instantly discover me, for it was reasonable to suppose that the visitants could come as near to their idol as they could, no doubt ascend the very steps leading up to it, and being thus near, must needs hear the least noise. Alarming as this consideration was, it soon subsided, for to avoid the possibility of this event, I determined to place myself in it before their arrival, and to sit perfectly still till their departure. If I should see occasion, or till I spoke, if I should find it proper to do so. The image was very well contrived to favor my purpose. There was in it a convenient seat and sure footing for my feet, and which also luckily suited my stature, so that when I sat, my face was directly upon a level with the holes, by which means I could, without changing my posture, see everything that was to be seen through them. Looking in my almanac, I found that the night preceding the Thursday on which the Indians were to come was the time of full moon, and that therefore they very probably would take the advantage of it to set out in the night, to be on the island early in the morning. Nor was my conjecture wrong, as the event proved. I thought, therefore, it would be prudent in me to take up my residence early in the evening. There were now but 3 days to come before their arrival, during which I changed my mind, perhaps, as many times as there are hours in that space. This moment I imagined hundreds of Indians prostrate before me with reverence and attention, whilst, like a lawgiver, I uttered precepts, and, like an orator, inculcated them with a voice magnified almost to the loudness of thunder. At another time my soul shrunk within me at the imagined noise of their dreadful yell, whilst my imagination painted me an enraged multitude tearing down in their fury branches of trees with which to surround the statue and to burn me in it. As one or other of these thoughts prevailed, I resolved for or against the undertaking. At last, with more than female resolution, I determined on the attempt, and from that moment fortified my mind and checked every rising fear. This was on the morning of the preceding day of their coming. Out of the few clothes which I had, I chose those which I thought would make the least rustling and were the least bulky. I thought one shell lamp would be sufficient, and that I would put that out when I came to the foot of the statue, as I should take my tinderbox with me. As I intended to get into the statue at night, and knew not how many hours I might be obliged to continue there the next day, I put a few roots in my pocket, and as I had nothing but shells to take any water in with me, and was afraid I might drop them and make a noise, I contented myself with some ripe limes and other moist fruits, of which there was plenty on the island. When the evening came on, having first performed some particular devotions on this occasion, I set out, and as soon as I had got low enough down the stairs, I fastened the 2 bolts of the door after me. I should have observed that before I set out, I concealed everything I had up and down in holes, which I covered up close with stones, so as nothing could be perceived, that in case any of the Indians should chance to wander into my apartments, they should discover nothing that might prompt them to suppose that any human creature inhabited them. When I came to the foot of the statue, I pulled off my shoes and left them there, that I might not make any noise with them in changing my posture as I sat. Though my situation was dark within, yet as the moon shone very bright, I had a very agreeable prospect of the island. My mind was too busy to suffer me to sleep. The expectation of the events of the coming day engrossed all my thoughts. I hoped, I feared, I trembled, I prayed. For a moment I resolved to descend and give up the enterprise. Again, much courage revived, and I was a heroine. The consciousness of the purity of my intention and the goodness of my design prevailed over every other thought, and I became calm and determined. Whilst I thus sat, waiting for the arrival of the Indians, and observing the signs of approaching day, a sudden clap of thunder broke just over my head. The introduction to a more violent hurricane than that which I had lately seen. This was accompanied with an earthquake that shook the whole island, and I expected every moment that I should be swallowed up, or, at the best, that the statue would be overturned with myself in it. I now trembled indeed, and all my courage failed. The storm still continuing, I at last made shift to descend the stairs, and being arrived in the passage, I sat down on the ground, unable to go far into it. It was darkness all around me, and I could not find my lamp and tinderbox. The earthquake still continued, as I perceived by the motion of the ground beneath me. I thought it could not be long before I should be buried alive in the earth, and therefore, as well as my disturbed spirits would permit, recommended myself into the hands of God. End of chapter 9.